Ha?
Ano ba na? Tama.
Dali lang, siya lang.
Where's my makeup doon?
Mainit eh.
Diba? Baka I don't want to look so good, ha?
Hindi, masama lang to. Baka ikaw ang ihalal ng bayan at hindi ako eh. Baka maisulat na, Ronnie, best na nila, patay na.
They might put the panels of the politics. No, but they'll never make it. With a name like that, no way.
Kaya ko sa kanya, tanggal na yung S sa Z, ang dami eh. May S na, may Z pa.
That's the... Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. When Defense Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile appeared on television last week to explain the decision of the Executive Committee of the National Security Council denying the request of former Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. for temporary release to campaign for the interim Batasang Pambansa elections, he declassified some documents revealing the alleged links of Mr. Aquino with the CIA and connections with the NPA. Former Senator Lorenzo Tanyada, the campaign manager of the opposition group, asked that Mr. Aquino be given a chance to appear on the same program to answer the statements of Secretary Enrile. President Marcos himself directed that Mr. Aquino be allowed to appear on television to answer the statements of Secretary Enrile, which the President said raised some very serious questions. It is against this background that we bring you this special Face the Nation program tonight with former Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. The panelists are the same gentlemen who interviewed Secretary Enrile. Teddy Owen, news editor of Bulletin today, Mr. Ray Naval, editor of the Times Journal, and Mr. Enrique Romualdez, editor of the Daily Express. Mr. Aquino, you're looking pretty good, sir. You look in shape.
Yes,
it's been a long time, but you look good.
I've trimmed down considerably after 5.5 years.
Mr. Romualdez, would you get one?
Well, Senator, we drew lots for coming here, and I got the honor of, or the privilege of asking the first question. I suppose the first order of business is to ask you whether the allegations made by Secretary Enrile, quoting from documents purportedly intercepted from you, linking you to the CIA and the NPA are true.
Well, I wrote Secretary Enrile, or rather President Marcos, on February 22 this year, asking the President, if it's possible, that he allows me to be present at the National Security Council meeting personally so I can explain many of the questions that they might bring up. And I feel that if they allowed me to attend that conference, all of this hassle would have been prevented. For example, question number 1, am I a CIA agent? Now, most emphatically I deny that. And Secretary Enrile was quoting from certain documents allegedly monitored in my room when I was speaking to a colonel, when he said that I admitted I worked for the CIA. Now, I think the monitoring was garbled. Maybe it should have been work with the CIA. Now, if they told me that I said I work with the CIA, I will admit that. I work with this agency in 3 instances, under instructions of my own president. As you very well know, I served 3 presidents of this republic. President Macapagal, President Garcia, and President Magsaysay, spanning 12 years. I was a technical assistant of these presidents. And therefore, if the transmission was accurate, it should have been work with, but not work for. And therefore, I must emphatically deny that I am a CIA agent. Now, regarding the so-called links with the NPA, that is again a very broad term. Do I have contacts with them? I never denied that. When I was a senator of the Republic, I've always gone out of my way to get in touch with every NPA personality in my province who would like to see me, because I felt that as a senator of the Republic, I can only be effective if I will know what people are saying. I will be the most useless senator from Tarlac if I did not even know what was happening in my province. And I never denied this from the military, from the very start. But to say that I am a communist, as they have said I am a communist, in fact, they sentenced me to die by firing squad. Well, I think that is a terrible lie because, one, in my entire trial, they were never able to come up with a single document making me a member of the Communist Party of the Philippines, let alone a member of a front organization. And yet, they convicted me to death as a ranking leader of the Communist Party. I tried to go to Red China. I wasn't even able to go to Red China in 1971. And Mr. Orly Mercado will testify to this. He had a crew from the Chronicle Broadcasting. They were allowed to go in. My crew was not allowed to go in. So here are the facts.
Mr. Aquino, let's take these statements of Secretary Enrile one by one.
Yes.
I'd pursue the question on the CIA links. Is there a difference when you say you work with and for the CIA?
Oh, definitely. You must remember that the Philippine government and the United States government have what we call an exchange of information agreement between two agencies. In other words, because the Philippines and the United States, or at least until I was arrested, I thought they were allies, we have an exchange program, an agreement, so that what information we might need, we can ask from CIA, and what CIA needs from the Philippines, they can ask from us. We are members of the CITO. We have a bilateral mutual defense agreement, and therefore allied agencies, intelligence agencies, exchange information. Now, Philippine agencies work with these agencies, but to say that they work for them and make them mercenary, that is a very, very great distinction.
Would you say, Mr. Aquino, that you had the trust and confidence of the CIA to a certain degree of intimacy?
No, I do not believe that it had anything to do with trust and confidence. I was a representative of the Philippine government, and they have to take my word for that. In other words, if I am a Philippine intelligence agent and I went to the CIA, they must presume that I'm working for the Philippine government. To that extent, they will trust me.
Mr. Aquino, what is the Indonesian Affair, which the Secretary always reminds us?
Well, this happened in 1958. I had a little inhibition in going public about this, but since the Secretary has already declassified it, maybe I'm free to say it. This happened 20 years ago. After the death of President Magsaysay, I was a technical assistant in Malacanang. I went back to Tarlac, where I was mayor. But I promised President Garcia that if he needed my services, he can always call me back to Malacanang. In 1958, I think it was February of 58, I was called back to Malacanang by President Garcia. And President Garcia told me he had a mission for me, a very delicate mission. And I said, what is the nature of the mission, Mr. President? He said, Ninoy, I am not too sure that I am getting the correct reports from our official military sources. I am afraid that they're being carried away by their enthusiasm. At any rate, he said, I want you to go to Indonesia and monitor the Philippine involvement in the revolution in Indonesia. I said, who will be my contact, Mr. President? And he mentioned and designated Major Jose Tino, and I think he's still alive today, a member of the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, to be my control officer. And the officer that will supply me with my needs will be Colonel George de la Armente. I went to Indonesia with a cover as a newspaperman from the Manila Times. But I also invited Mr. Tony Escoda, who was then a stringer of Time magazine. Together with Mr. Tony Escoda, after I prepared my codes and my radio communications and all, we flew to Zamboanga, and in Zamboanga, we were picked up by a blockade runner. The name of the ship is MV Isabel, and the captain of the ship was Captain Bruno Dick, who was a submariner of Hitler in the Nazi Navy. Subsequently, after the war, he became, I suppose you might call a mercenary, and he was a blockade runner under Misageries Maritime. And they were bringing goods to Indonesia, and they were bringing out copra, and we took this boat.
If I may interrupt, Mr. Aquino.
Yes.
This blockade runner is also in the employ of the CIA?
No, I do not believe he was a CIA. I believe he was in British intelligence. I am not too sure now where Mr. Bruno Dick was involved. But the Philippines was greatly involved in this revolt. It was known as the Colonel's Revolt. It was headed by General Alex Cawilarang, who was then attaché in Washington, Jup Waru, who was the attaché in Peking, Benji Sumwal, who was the head of the 7th Territorium, Colonel Ranturambi, who was the head of the lower Territorium, And then on the fringes, you had Kahar Musakar of the Darul Islam and Andy Pangerang. Well, how was the Philippines involved? The supplies were coming from Taiwan. But Taiwan and Celebes is a very long flight. So these planes flew from Taiwan to Clark Field and refueled in Clark Field. But it was still a long flight from Clark Field to Minado in Mapangit Airport, so that they had to land in the most southern tip of the Philippines, known as Sanga-Sanga, which is the airstrip of the Philippine Air Force developed by the U.S. Army. President Garcia's instruction to me was very clear. Ninoy, he said, I want to be sure that no Philippine base will ever be used to mount an attack against Indonesia. In other words, no mercenary plane owned by the CIA or allied agencies will be based in Sanga-Sanga, go out into a bombing mission in Indonesia, and come back. Now, as far as supplies, as far as medicine, as far as evacuating personnel, all right. But never mount an offensive action. Those were my instructions from the president. And therefore, I went down to Indonesia and I monitored this. And the CIA were working there with the mercenaries. Unfortunately, one of the mercenary pilots, Mr. Pope, was shot down in a mission over Ambon. And after he was shot down, he was captured alive. And in 2 days, Mr. Sukarno was putting him all over the international press as a CIA mercenary, and that folded the entire mission. And I came back to the Philippines. That is the Indonesian affair.
Mr. Aquino, there was also mention that you went to the CIA to train or something?
Well, this is the background there. In 1954, after I brought down Mr. Taruk from the mountains, I got married, and I took a leave of absence from the Manila Times, and I went to the United States. And President Magsaysay wrote letters of recommendation for me in Washington. Fortunately, the military attaché in Washington was my brother-in-law, Captain Carlos J. Albert, who was the head of the Philippine attaché mission in Washington. And therefore, under this letter of President Magsaysay, he asked the attaché to try to enroll me on certain seminars and you might call them short courses on international communism, on tradecraft, and many others, which I did, and I came back to the Philippines after about 4 or 5 months.
What you're saying, Mr. Aquino, is that you did not train as a spy for the CIA.
Oh, never.
If we
never.
may call that...
No, but you must remember this. Even if we assume that I trained, at least 10,000 Philippine officers have trained in various military schools in America. General Ramos is a graduate of West Point, 4 years. Melchor is a graduate of Annapolis. Does that make them agents of these foreign governments? There's nothing wrong with that, 10,000 people have trained there. And in my particular case, it was not even a formal training. It was just an attendance of seminars and lectures on international communism, on organizations and things of this nature.
So, there might be a slight difference, between going to West Point and going to school, the CIA, because West Point is an open, public, you're nominated for these things and so forth.
Well, there's no difference there as long as you're sent by your government.
Also, in other words, you were sent by the government.
Definitely, I was. You can't possibly go in there without a government recommendation. I don't think they will just pick you out from the blue. And the Philippine military attaché was the one who accompanied me in all of these seminars.
When you say you worked with the CIA, Mr. Senator, do you mean to say that you obtained information which they needed from here and gave it to them? Like, for example...
No, it's the other way around. We needed information from them, and we took it from them. I will cite you an example. Secretary really mentioned about Algiers, that I left and disappeared for 1 hour, and I contacted the chief CIA mission in Algiers. Well, here's the background of the story. In 1965, there was the Afro-Asian Conference in Algiers, composed of about 77 countries, Afro-Asian countries. I was made or designated spokesman of the Philippine delegation. The head of the Philippine delegation was then Vice President Emmanuel Pilaes and co-chaired by the Foreign Secretary, the late Mauro Mendez. When we were preparing our briefing papers for this mission, we found out the tremendous inadequacy of the Philippine government on information regarding Africa. I think we only had 2 missions in Africa in those days, Cairo and Nigeria. Because we lacked the information we needed as to the leaning of these African countries, the dossier on their leaders, the personalities involved, they were asking, where can we get this information? So I said, most probably, the only place we can get this will be from the American government. And so Secretary Mendez said, why don't you contact Ambassador Blair, which I did. Ambassador Blair referred me to the station chief in Manila of the CIA. And we gave them our requirements. I said, there are 77 countries involved here. May we know your assessment? How many are inclined to China? How many are inclined to Russia? How many are inclined to the West? You know, a complete profile, since we did not have the information. You must recall that this conference was very crucial because China and Russia were fighting. China did not want Russia to come in because they claim Russia is not an Asian or an African power. On the other hand, Russia said, I am an Asian power because half of my country is in Asia. Egypt was supporting Russia. Indonesia was supporting China. The Philippines did not have any relation with these two countries. However, the Philippines, Japan, and Thailand, who were more or less pro-West, wanted to coordinate efforts. And so, we met with our counterparts. My counterpart was Mr. Akatani of the Japanese Gaimusho and Ambassador Sumpung Sucharitakul of the Thai Foreign Embassy. And we tried to pool our intelligence resources. When I went to the CIA station chief in Manila and I told him of our problems, he said, yes, we can make those informations available to you, but there is very limited time if you're leaving tomorrow. Now, why don't we do this, he said. I'll give you a name of our man in Algiers. Here is your code. Here is his phone number. The moment you arrive in Algiers, you get in touch with this man, and I can assure you all the information you need will be delivered to you in Algiers. So when we got to Algiers, I looked for this man. And I did not speak French. And you know, Algiers is a former French colony. So I asked one of the mission members, if I'm not mistaken, it was Tex Castro, Pacifico Castro, is now our ambassador to Algiers, to accompany me to this rendezvous point, wherein I got the information. So it's the other way around. It is us getting information from them rather than them getting information from us.
Yes, you said a little earlier, Mr. Aquino, that it was an exchange of information one way, two ways. Did the CIA ever ask you to give them information on the Hukbalahap movement in this country or the NPA movement?
You know, you must remember that I was governor of Tarlac province. And Clarkfield is part of Clarkfield is in Tarlac. And therefore, the securities of these bases were very important. They had a very important installation in Tarlac known as the San Miguel Communication Center. This is a very big communication center, and I understand that most of their Polaris submarines are actually guided by this communication center. From Strategic Air Command, they beam their codes to San Miguel Center, and from San Miguel Station, they beam into the Indian Ocean. Naturally, the CIA and the Office of Strategic Intelligence, or the OSI of Clarkfield, would exchange information. They'll ask us, what are the dispositions in this area? How could we possibly avoid any conflict in these areas? And we did exchange information when I was governor of Tarlac.
So can we just go back to the Algiers thing? So we go through with the entire perspective of the story now. You said, sir, that you were... who introduced you to the station manager of the CIA in Manila? It was Ambassador William Blair, I think.
I know the station manager here, and Ambassador Blair, I've met him in parties. There's no secret about that. These are overt, they're not covert agents. You know, the station chief is usually an overt agent. And he introduced himself as a CIA man, station chief.
So wouldn't you think it a little unusual that here you are, you just go to an ambassador of a foreign country, and in a moment he tells you, yes, I can give you all this information, and then he tells the station manager to, okay, here's Senator Aquino, give him all the information he needs, here's the code, here's the name, and this is the password, unless they sort of trusted you implicitly.
Yes, it's not unusual when you consider that we've been under America for 65 years. We were a colony of America. We have the closest bilateral relation with America. We are linked with them in situ, and our people are training with them. You know, and for a while, it was even said that our foreign policy was being made in Washington. So there was really nothing unusual about this. And in fact, up to now, I think, when we need certain vital information, which we do not have the capability of doing, for example, satellite photos of NASA, these are being provided to us by the United States government.
So in Algiers, sir, you did go with Ambassador Castro. As far as the statements of Secretary Enrique are concerned, they are correct in the point that you were with Ambassador Castro and you did meet with the CIA.
I am not too sure whether it's Ambassador Castro, but I did go with somebody. In fact, before Secretary Enrique revealed that he was a French-speaking gentleman, I thought it was Nestor Mata. Because Nestor Mata and I were living in the same room, you see. But now that he mentioned, and I recalled, yes, I think the Secretary is correct, it must have been Tex Castro because he was the only French-speaking gentleman.
Yeah, Nestor for sure doesn't talk French. Yes. So you did meet with the CIA man?
Oh, yes, yes. I got the information we needed. I turned it over to Secretary Mendez. And may I say, when I came back to the Philippines, I think Secretary Mendez wrote Mr. Macapagal about my work. And the president very kindly gave me a presidential commendation
See, Mr.
on this mission.
I think we might tell our televiewers and our radio. You know, just for the sake of the public, we might tell our televiewers and our radio listeners that we are coming to you from, this is the amphitheater.
Yes, yes.
I understand you have, this is where you meet members of the family and so on once in a while.
Yes.
Your mother's birthday was the other day?
Yes.
All right. So that this is near the airport and jets keep, this is a very busy airport now. MIA has become a rather busy
Ronnie,
airport.
may I also add that
So the sound is not deliberate, really.
in 1958, after my mission in Indonesia, I received the highest presidential commendation from President Garcia for that mission. And he even said in that mission that I risked my life in that mission, and he commended my work for exceptional meritorious service.
Let's just go back a little bit to this CIA business. No? Was that all that was asked of you to give this strength disposition of MPA or hooks in the basis areas?
Yes, at the most, I would not even call them CIA. You know, it's so difficult to bandy this word about because really, when you start talking of CIA, that's a very, very broad term. Everybody is a CIA. Usually they are intelligence agents of various organizations in Manila. Maybe AID, or maybe U.S. Embassy, or maybe the Clark Field authorities, or the Navy authorities.
Probably as cover, no?
These are probably as cover, but there is another project. When I was a governor of Tarlac, I received communication from the Foreign Secretary. They told me that the United States government needed 1,100 hectares in Tarlac, very badly, for the prosecution of the Vietnam War. And this was codenamed Project Bamboo. And they asked my assistance to help consolidate this property. The United States government bought it, I think for an amount of 3 million odd pesos. The property, once titled to a corporation, was turned over to the Philippine government, and then the Philippine government turned around and listed to the United States government for the setting up of this tremendous communications setup.
I mean, this something like exchange, information exchange arrangement.
Yes.
Did they ever involve assessments of situations or readouts or readings on persons in government or in private sector?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm almost sure the Philippine Intelligence Service, the ESAP, the G2, usually have these formal arrangements. I know, for example, that Colonel Lucban of the NBI had formal agreements with the FBI and Interpol for exchange of information on dossiers. So that when it comes to personality profiles of this nature, you know, it's one of those things, scratch my back and I scratch yours. It's a two-way deal. If we are following certain Filipinos, let's say in America, for subversive activities, since we don't have the capability, we ask them to please do us the favor, and vice versa.
No, I was thinking more in terms of, let's say, do you have anything on this guy that we can use, and or how do you think this guy will jump if we move him one way or that way?
No, I do believe that that is the province of their own people. But since you brought this thing up, may I inform you that maybe Mr. Marcos should look into his own backyard. I have just received information that the Philippine government, through the Central Bank of the Philippines last November, concluded an agreement with a certain Doremos company in Washington, D.C. Doremos company in Washington, D.C. will be paid 13.5 million pesos by the Philippine government over the next 3 years to improve the image of the Philippine government in America. I don't know whether Mr. Marcos knows it, but Doremos and company, when I looked into its background, showed that it had certain personalities who are formerly CIA. Now, this agreement of Doremos,
Let the plane pass by.
this agreement entered into by Doremos and company, by the way, I submit is illegal because the Central Bank of the Philippines should not be spending money for publicity and gimmick purposes. At best, it should be the Philippine Tourist Bureau or Department of Tourism. And the principal here is Mr. Francisco Tatad, who is described as Minister of Information. The agreement was signed on November 29, 1977 in Washington, D.C. Subsequently, on December 14, 1977, about 3 months ago, Doremos and Company registered itself with the Department of Justice in America under the so-called Foreign Agents Registration Act. So that now very clearly, Duremos and Company is an agent of the Philippine government. For 13.5 million pesos, the Philippine government will now pay Duremos and Company to improve our image. But let me give this profile. Among the ranking officers of this Duremos and Company are William R. Codus, Regional Vice President, a former State Department Assistant Chief of Protocol for Visits. John Horton, Vice President, Manager of Washington, D.C. Office, a retired colonel and White House aide to President Truman. Charles R. Pussy, Jr., Vice President, formerly of the United States Army. And here is the nigger in the pile, George Lawrence Fisher, Jr., formerly with the CIA. Now, why am I alerting Mr. Marcos to this? It is common knowledge, as confirmed by a former CIA agent, David Atlee Phillips, in his book, The Night Watch, that American public relations firms, especially those representing foreign governments lobbying in Washington, are usually CIA fronts. Now, why is this agreement dangerous? Because the Central Bank of the Philippines and Duremos agreed that Duremos will be given all the secret information on the Philippines so that it will be able to prepare a presentation for foreign investment. In other words, these American agents can come to the Philippines, demand economic information from the Philippine government, demand our projections, in the guise that they can better sell the Philippines if they have this information.
Is that in the agreement, sir?
That is in the agreement. And I say that the President should investigate this immediately, because I believe that this will be exposing Philippine secrets unnecessarily to a company in Washington of very dubious character.
Now, just to clarify the point of registering as an agent of a foreign government, that is a normal regulation under the United States law, that if you are doing any advertising, any promotion, even in radio, television programs for a foreign country, you have to register with the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States as an agent of a foreign government. That is one of their basic laws.
Well, whatever it is, but I submit that this agreement entered into between the Central Bank and Duremos exposes our secrets openly. We have the Philippine Embassy in Washington. We have the Philippine Information Center. We have the Philippine houses. We have our own tourism people. Why should we resort to a agency and pay them 13.5 million pesos? Mind you, this is only the bottom price. This is just the beginning. The program is so flexible that any other transport of these people coming to the Philippines will be borne by the Philippine government. Now, why should we do that? Why should we hire foreign people to sell our own country when we all have our competent personnel? We have our own ad agencies here.
Mr. Aquino, I certainly am amazed at the extent of your information. For a detained person, you certainly know several things. Do you have contacts with the outside?
Through my lawyers.
Through your lawyers?
Yes.
I think the reason Ray asked that question was we can probably move on to another of the statements of Secretary Enrile, because as we said before, we want to give you the opportunity of answering those statements, which President Marcos said raised some very serious questions. Now, some of the documents produced by Secretary Enrile, Mr. Aquino, were the letters that, or the notes that you were sending out to various people, if I recall correctly, Benigno, former Congressman Lingard, and so on and so forth. Now, did you ever send those letters? Did you ever send those notes?
I wrote those letters. I do not deny that I wrote those letters. But I deny that they were clandestinely written to be smuggled out. Now, let me give you the background. I will say that maybe Secretary Enrile was misinformed. I would prefer to believe that the intelligence officer who reported to him wanted to shine his rank, you know, and appear handsome to the secretary. What is the truth of the matter? In 1974, I had a conference with Secretary Enrile here. And Secretary Enrile told me, bakit di pa naman tayo magkasama for the good of the country? I think, sabi niya, we should now unite. And believe me, sabi niya, Ninoy, I've been all over the Philippines. The people like martial law. Sabi niya, ako din man ako politiko eh. I meet a lot of people. I meet a lot of our own intelligent people all over the country. They're very happy that peace and order has been restored. They're very happy that they can now do business. And people generally are happy. Believe me, sabi niya sa akin. Kako, Johnny, I do not know whether that is correct or not, no? Because I am not allowed to read newspaper. I am not allowed to hear radio. And my contacts are limited to my family and my lawyers. And maybe I said my family only tell me what I want to hear. So we separated. After we separated, I called the senior officer in this camp. I said, I was intrigued by the report of Secretary Enrile. Would you, I said, allow me to do my own survey? Because if I will find out that the Filipino people are happy with the martial of Mr. Marcos, who am I to suffer here? So he said, what are your plans, Mr. Senator? I said, here's my project plan. Allow me to write my key people, the people that I can really trust, the people who will not pull the wool over my eyes. But I said, it must be coached in a language that will not appear that you were the one ordering me to do it, otherwise they will not do it. He said, oh, why don't you write the letter and let's see it? So I said, oh, I will limit it only to these few people as a test. And I wrote the letter, and I handed them to him. I gave them to this officer. He read them, he left, and then a few days later he came back and told me, hindi na raw bali, sir. I said, all right, if that's how you want it, let's forget it. This is in 1974. So there was never any attempt as a clandestine attempt to bring these letters out. It was an attempt on my part to really assess the situation. What happened to the dissidents in our area? Are they still alive? Is Dante still alive? What are the programs? I wanted to know because I'm held in comunicado. Because if I feel that the people really support Mr. Marcos, why should I hold out? But then this officer told me, hindi na raw bale, so we dropped the whole thing. So now, if the secretary believes that I was really smuggling those letters out, and I hope he's listening, I hope Mr. Enrile will come here, confront me with this officer face to face, and put us on a lie detector. There was never no attempt on my part.
Who is the officer, sir?
Colonel Yap.
Mr. Senator, this problem of the letters intrigues me because in everything you talk about the interest of the people, but is the communist movement the only interest of the people? Secondly, why do you talk about a lost cause in one of those letters? Is the cause lost? What are you referring to when you say is the cause lost?
Well, the cost of the opposition, because I was given the impression that all of our leaders have already transferred to the president's bandwagon. All the governors that we elected, all of the mayors that we've elected. Now, it's the cause of the opposition. I mean, are the people really believe 100% behind martial law?
That wasn't what it appeared to be in the letter. You were talking about the NPA movement, and then later on you asked, is the cause lost? Well,
as far as the NPA movement, is it true that they have already given up? Is it true that they've been completely dismantled? Have they given up their entire cause? Now, I want to know that. I want to be guided in that particular instance, because you must remember that this is particularly virulent in Central Luzon and North Luzon. I believe that if they have lost their mass base in Central Luzon, they will be hard put.
Yes, but the question is, when you talked earlier, you were talking about the feeling of the people. But most of your letters were limited to the movement of the communists, that's all. You didn't talk about the rest of the people. Now, this sort of intrigued me as a peculiar statement that you made.
No. If you will note in those letters, please go to all of our mayors, one by one, and get their assessment of their situation. Go to Tito Munda in the governor's office. Get the assessment from the governor's office. So that is the assessment of the people.
Pocholo?
Yes, I was going to ask, what did you expect to gain from knowing about dispositions of NPA forces and so forth?
Well, you see, as a national leader, as a Secretary General of the Opposition, I would be the first to congratulate the President if it's true that he has dismantled the problems of this country. The NPAs on one side, the Mindanao people on the other side. I would like to know, because to me, the best gauge of the administration is, or the administration's effectivity is this: if the dissident movement loses their support, that means to say that the government is very, very effective. But if the dissident movement is increasing and gaining adherence, then more or less you can conclude that the government is not hitting target. So it's very, very important to make an assessment how the administration is going by way of checking their opposition and their dissident movement.
So the question will then arise, why these particular people you wrote to? Are they in a position to assess the dissident movement? Do they know whether Dante is dead or alive? For instance, would Brent Giao know whether Dante was dead or alive? Or would former Congressman Lingard know whether Dante was dead or alive, when you yourself don't know whether Dante is dead or alive?
Right. Firstly, why these people?
Yes,
They're the people I trust. In other words, if I am going to rely on any assessment, I will have to rely on people that I have already worked with and with proven capability to give me an unbiased report. Number two, they may not know it, but surely they can go to people who know. For example, in Tarlac. When I was governor of Tarlac, I never met these dissidents face to face. But there are certain key personalities in the villages, in the barrios, the elders in the barrios, who met these people, or who know somebody who knows them. Now, these are what you call the contacts. Maybe you can get your information second-hand or third-hand, but it's pretty accurate. Now, Brent does not know these leaders, but there are certain people who know the leaders, and since he has the mobility to go around, which I do not have, he can ask them. Pinatatanong ka ni Senator Aquino kung ano ang sitwasyon dito sa atin, yung mahina na ba yan, patay na ba yan. Usually, we know in the province, and we will be useless as local leaders if we don't know. We know exactly. I may not know it immediately when it happens, but 3 or 4 days or 5 days after, I will know.
Mr. Aquino, if you say that these letters were supposed to have been delivered through the military officers, don't you think that you were endangering these people?
No.
Because the information that you were trying to obtain were supposedly about the communists, about the NPA.
Why should it endanger them? On the contrary, they will be praised by the military and they can give the information. The military will just be too happy to get that kind of an information.
No, because there is always the insinuation that they have contacts with the communists.
Well, that is to be proven. The military intelligence service will not look for a man who has no contact. You will become valuable to the intelligence service only if you have contact. If you have no contact, you're useless to them.
If they trust you.
Well, trust doesn't come in here. You see, in the military intelligence service, you don't talk of trust. You talk of value. In other words, as long as your information is good, I don't have to trust you. You may be a double agent. You may be feeding me something. But as long as your information is accurate, to that extent, you are valuable to me.
Since you... yes, go ahead, Teddy, please.
Mr. Senator, you talk about being the senator of Tarlac and the area of Central Luzon, but you were elected senator at large. You're supposed to represent the whole nation.
Yes.
Not like the congressmen who have their own. Do you still maintain that you're just a senator of Tarlac? And
No,
so your
I am
interests are only in that area?
Primarily, technically, yes, because whenever they address me, the gentleman from Tarlac, so you can never really disassociate yourself from your area. Number two, while you may belong to the entire country in general, usually your expertise will be in the area where you come from. For example, if you are a senator from the Ilocos region, when they talk about tobacco, you are supposed to be knowledgeable on tobacco. If you are a senator from Negros Occidental, you are supposed to be knowledgeable about sugar. If you're a senator from Tarlac, you are supposed to be knowledgeable about insurgency because that's where it is. In other words, while I am a senator of the entire country, I cannot have an expertise on the Mindanao problem as much as I am expected to have expertise in my own backyard.
But you're supposed to know all about the whole country because you were elected at large.
Yes, and that brings me to the second point that Secretary Enrile said, nakita mo na, meron pala si intelligence net. What's so bad about that? I was preparing to run for the presidency. I would have been the craziest politician to aspire for the presidency without an intelligence net. I must know how the liberals are thinking. I must know how the local officials are thinking. I must know the feeling of the people so that I can tailor my program of government.
So your intelligence network extends throughout the whole country, Mr.
Yes, in fact, I offered my services to the secretary. In all humility, I called him and I said, Mr. Secretary, I said, I'm appalled by the carnage in Mindanao. Please give me a chance to help the government. Most of the leaders in Mindanao, I said, of the MNLF, were formerly liberals. The number 2 man of the MNLF is a very good friend of mine. I campaigned for him, Abdul Kair Alonto, when he ran for vice mayor of Marawi. The man who killed General Bautista allegedly, reportedly, I don't know whether he did it, but if he did, the mayor of Patikul, Usman Sali, is my compadre. Shortly before martial law, I went down to be the godfather of the daughter. Many of these people running around in that area were formerly connected with the Liberal Party, or some of them even worked in my own office in the Senate. The nephew of Dato Dusinumba, for example, in Lanao. The Maruhum Sars are very good friends of mine. They're personal friends of mine. The Abubakars are personal friends of mine. So I said, let us forget politics and let's forget our differences. Please give me a chance. I even offered this program. Allow me to escape secretly. I will infiltrate Sabah and find out for you the source of all of these guns and ammunition that is causing so much death in this country. If I succeed, I come back to my jail. Nobody will be the wiser. And if I'm dead, you just wash me off.
Mr. Aquino,
He said, I'll study it, but they never answered me.
I think Secretary Enrile made mention of or intimated that you had advance information on the attack on Holo.
No, I was telling him that this is the program of the work. And from the news reports, I said that you are giving us, by sheer analysis, more or less, if you are trained in what they call war games theory, you can more or less project certain happenings. Now, holo is the key to that entire archipelago. A dissident force, to create maximum political impact, must capture the heartland. For example, the Vietnam War was going on for 20 years, but the moment Saigon fell, that was the end of the ball game. Now, I said, soon enough, you can expect an upon holo. And it happened.
Now, this also raises one question, sir, and that is, you mentioned several people who were obviously working against the government in Mindanao and so on and so forth. They were friends of yours, or you knew them, you were at their baptism or whatever it is, and so on and so forth. Now you offer your services to the government to go and interdict or prevent the flow of arms to their cause. In a sense, weren't you not actually turning against friends in this regard? Because then they would have been at a loss against the military forces of this government, and they would have been badly outnumbered. And then in that sense, you were, I wouldn't use the word betray, that's a nasty word to use. But you were not being fair to your friends.
No, I am being fair to the Filipino people. They are my friend, but you mean to tell me that if you're a criminal, I will abet your criminality?
I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying that, sir.
My thinking is, as long as foreign arms are coming into the country, are being brought in by somebody from the outside, we will always have an escalation of killing. And our main mission is, first of all, to close our borders, because we should not give sanctuary to our dissident forces, and we must prevent them from getting arms. The moment you prevent them from getting arms, it will be easier to negotiate with them already. I have negotiated with Mr. Taruk. I have negotiated in the surrenders of Tawan-Tawan and Kamlon in the 50s. And this is the main force. As long as they're getting outside support, they will never talk to you. But the moment you can cut out the outside support, then give them an alternative program, an attractive program, let's say an amnesty, resettlement program, then I believe you can succeed.
What did Mr. Rojas and Mr. Salonga and all the others say about your plans to run for the presidency?
What did they say? When? Before?
Yeah, you said you were planning to run for the presidency.
Yes.
Did they get any reaction from them?
No, I suppose the reactions, they will have to redouble their effort.
Efforts to support you? Or to
to contest the nomination themselves. I mean, assuming that they had the ambition, I suppose it's a legitimate reaction on their part to redouble their efforts if they saw that I was moving.
That brings us to the present situation, Mr. Aquino. You are a candidate of the Lakas ng Bayan.
Yes.
And according to former Senator Rojas, you're not supposed to run, and they might... well, not impeach you, but take you out of the party.
I am very glad that you finally brought the needed commercial, because I was afraid, you know, I will miss this chance.
Oh, you got 1 hour and 30 minutes.
No, I would like to say that I was the one who originally proposed the national boycott, in fairness to to Senator Rojas and Salonga. That Friday morning at the Batas and Bayan, when they were meeting, and Governor San Luis of Laguna proposed black voting, I was so stunned that when Joby visited me at noon, I said, Joby, please issue a joint statement in our name, asking and urging our people for a national boycott. Because this is just too much. The government already has all the forces in its command. They have the entire machinery of politics which we do not have. Eh ngayon kako, bulok voting pa. Abi, mamamatay naman kako tayo dyan. Eh yung bulok voting din, isinuka na ng matandang lipunan. Eh palala mo naman sa atin ng bagong lipunan. Eh huwag naman kakong ganon. So this was the situation. Joby took my word for it, and he reported to Jerry about my reaction, and they issued subsequently the press statement. Later on, I had to rethink. Eh, paano naman kako kung pwede makipag-usap sa bayan kung hindi na ako kakandidato rito? Eh, ako yun naman talagang kating-kating ng makipag-usap sa bayan. In fact, I would like to thank President Marcos for this opportunity and the NMPC for allowing me to talk to our people now for the first time in 5.5 years. Eh, kako, Joby, talagang gustong-gusto ko kako makipag-usap sa bayan eh. Kung hindi ako kakandidato, hindi ako pwede makipag-usap. Eh, pwede ba akong payagan na nyo akong mag-isa? Let us maintain the party boycott, pero sa Manila lang. Ang purpose ko lang ako, makipagkamay lang ako sa mamamayan, saka makausap ko lang. Eh, talaga ako hirap na. I have been in solitary for 5.5 years. And you don't know, Mr. Naval, what is to be alone 24 hours a day. It is not true what Secretary Enrique said that I am free to roam around here. That's not true. I am brought out 1 hour a day to exercise, and I am brought back to my room and I am locked up. For the last 5.5 years, I've been locked up alone in my room.
But you have a television and a radio.
Yes, no radio, only television.
What do you have
What about
visitors?
newspapers?
Now, since Mr. Marcos and I met in Malacanang in June of 1977, he ordered that they should give me now newspapers. But that's the situation. So I told Joby, pwede ba ako, Prof, na pakiusap mo kay Jerry? And so, they met, and they said, all right, provided you not carry the name of the Liberal Party, we will grant you. So they granted me.
Let the plane go by.
Now that you're a candidate for a seat in the Batas, can we say now that you are in agreement with Mr. Marcos that this is part of the normalization process for the country?
Yes, I believe that Mr. Marcos is moving towards normalization. Because from a situation where we had no parliament at all, we have now have at least half a parliament. Even though it's not all, you know, you cannot ask for everything. Because if you are Mr. Marcos, you are the dictator. Why should you even bother? But the very fact that he opened up a little window, I think, is already enough. Of course, you can argue, sinuntok ka ni Mr. Marcos. Nung nadaang ka, itinayo ka. Tapos, salamat Mr. Marcos, tinayo mo ako. Sinuntok ka nung una eh. But that's beside the point. The fact alone that he has allowed the opposition to speak for 45 days, to come out with our leaflet, is already, to me, a tremendous opportunity. And I am taking advantage of this opportunity. Kung hindi ako kumandidato, wala naman ako sa division ngayon.
What made you decide to run in Metro Manila instead of Central Luzon?
Well, you see, if I run in Central Luzon, I was figuring out that if I win in Central Luzon, people will say, natural, tigarya naman si Ninoy eh. Lahat ng kamag-anak niya, tigarya sa Tarlac, tiga Pampanga yan, kapampangan niya yan, kapampangan si Ninoy, di siyempre mananalo yan. But in Metro Manila, I am not a native of Metro Manila. Therefore, my personality will be submerged. If I win here, it is not because Ninoy Aquino won, but because the opposition won. If we win. In other words, if I presented myself in this election, I merely wanted to give our people a vehicle to express their frustration or their anger if there is. At kung sila naman yung natutuwa at kami patatalo, then we will know that the people are supporting Mr. Marcos. And this is, I believe, the context where Mr. Marcos should take us. We are really his friends. Because how else would he know that the people accept him if there is really no real opposition?
Do you think you'll get a fair shake from the COMELEC?
It is neither here nor there. Whether you get a fair shake or not, to my point, is secondary. Mr. Marcos owns the ball club. He owns the referees. We entered the fight. Pilay pa kami. Okay lang.
But at least you entered the ballpark, huh?
Pinapasok pa kami. Nung araw hindi pa kami makapasok. Ngayon na pumasok na kami. But I do not entertain hope. Alam ko na, siya ba naman si Mr. Marcos, luko-luko ba naman siyang tatawag ng papatalo? Ay, siyempre, siguro gagawin na niya yung magagawa niya. Pero, to my mind, the fact alone that he will allow us to talk and mount the platform is a beginning. Now, as the Chinese say, a journey of 1,000 miles, begins with the first step.
If you don't make it to the IBP, what would your assessment be?
Well, to my mind, the IBP is secondary here. Sinasabi po ni Mr. Marcos, paano na kaya mga kalaban namin yan? Walang program of government. At this stage of the government, at this stage of the fight, to ask us for a program of government is premature. Kamukha nito, ako'y pumasok sa first grade pa lang. Tatanong mo sa akin, anak, anong kukunin mo sa college? Magka-high school pa lang po ako di pa naman ako sa college Even if we all win, 21 kami, palagay mo na, nanalo kami lahat. 200 yan sa batasan What can 21 do? Our only job in this particular combat now is fiscalization. Mr. Marcos will propound the thesis of government. We will supply the antithesis so that in the clash of ideas, the people will have the synthesis.
When you talk about entering Manila, I thought of your earlier statement when you said, as far as Holo was concerned, in relation to the battle in the south, you go to the heart, and then half of your problem is won. So you went to Manila, you think this is the heart, because I'm talking in the context of the statement of Jerry Rojas.
Very clear, very clear.
Party. Now you're saying this is the heart of the nation.
I believe that no matter how insignificant our symbolic protest in Manila is, you will agree with me that if the opposition wins in Manila, its victory will reverberate all over the world. Because, firstly, the First Lady is fighting in Manila. And whether you like it or not, Mrs. Marcos is a surrogate of Mr. Marcos. And a defeat of Mrs. Marcos will be a resounding defeat. It will be something like Indira or something like Ali Bhutto losing in Rawalpindi or in Kashmir.
That's another story. But you're forgetting about the young candidates, the new candidates, Mr. Aquino.
Definitely, even the young candidates are coming up. I do believe that after this fight, ako siguro masasama na rin sa mga damata na. At I don't know, Mr. Marcos was even hinting that even if I will win, I might have to go to court to claim my seat in the Batasan. But actually, why do I want to go to the Batasan? I have only one mission. If we go to the Batasan, I would like to propose, number one, that we finish our job as soon as possible. If we can finish it in 1 year or 2 years, good, so that we can go to full normalization to the regular Batasan. Sapagkat itong open-ended, at least Mr. Marcos said, wag naman sobra sa 6 years. Ako ayoko pa ng 6 years, kung maaari, isang taon lang tapusin na so that we can go to the regular district election. That's my first mission, my first proposal. My second proposal to Mr. Marcos is to allow us to set up a Blue Ribbon Committee in the Batasan, similar to the one we have in the Senate, so that we can all lodge our complaint for his own good. Kamukha nito, sinasabi nila na yung kaibigan ni Mr. Marcos ni Vicini, katakot-takot ang kinita sa Westinghouse deal. Hindi naman natin nalalaman kung kasama si Mr. Marcos dyan. In fairness to him, let us set up a Blue Ribbon Committee and have this completely investigated and exonerate him. This is my point. There are many, many anomalies going on in this country today. For example, 24 families alone, 24 families connected with Malacanang have gotten 6 billion pesos of the Philippine loans in 72. 24 na pamilya lang. Sinasabi ni Presidente Marcos, my aim in new society is to redistribute wealth. 24 nakuha lahat ng dinamnam ng bayan. Inubos nila. The Philippines owes $2.4 billion foreign loans. Less than 20 families have taken 60% of those 2 billion. I want that investigated. Kailangan naman malaman ng bayan kung sino itong mga dambuhalang pamilyang ito na nagpapasasa dito sa bayan na naghihirap naman ng bayan. These are the missions that we have. And I hope Mr. Marcos will understand that if we're doing this, it's also for his own good. Para naman itong mga bulong-bulungan na tuwing may yayaman niya, kasangkot siya, mahuhugasan. At kung siya talagang kasangkot nga, dapat namang maparusahan.
Well, it does seem that you, Mr. Aquino, have, as I said, besides a lot of access to information, you're really getting your figures left, right, and center. Anyway, let's move away back to 69, if you don't mind, sir. Because you mentioned, for instance...
pagkakataon ko na ito, binabalik mo naman ako sa wala sa usapan.
No, this is rather important because the question even I asked of Secretary Enrile on Face the Nation was whether the situation in your case was motivated by some political reasons because you were a viable candidate for the presidency. That was as faithfully as I can recall the words. Now, do you think that Mr. Rojas would have allowed you to grab the presidency of the Liberal Party or the nomination because he was as president of the party, he had control over that party. It's going to be a difficult job.
Definitely, it would be a difficult job. You know, our situation in those days was a friendly competition. I've always considered Jerry my elder brother. You know, my father and his father were law partners for a long, long time. And we're really not very close. In fact, he's my fraternity brother. But it does not mean to say that if I fight him, I am against him. Now, it's possible also that if he got the nomination for president, I would have been his vice president. Or if I got the presidency, he would have been my vice president because there's no incompatibility. I'm from Luzon, he's from Visayas. Or maybe Joby would have been the vice president and I would have run for the Senate again and run for the Senate president. In the same token that Mr. Macapagal and Mr. Marcos had their own competition within the Liberal Party once upon a time.
You know why I asked that question, sir, is because one of the things that Secretary Enrile mentioned was a conversation you had with, suppose, CIA researchers, if I'm not mistaken, and that during that conversation there was an assessment of the situation as far as who might succeed President Marcos and so on and so forth, who had the best chance of beating him.
Correction number one, I did not have a conference with those researchers.
But they came to you?
No, they were never allowed here. They visited my wife, and because they were my old friends, they started chatting. And this is sometime in 1974. One of them was former Ambassador Paul Kattenberg. He was in Manila once upon a time as the chief labor attaché. Oh no, he was the chief political officer sometime in the 50s. Subsequently, he became one of the bright boys of McNamara, one of the defense department with Ellsberg, you know. And he was posted in Vietnam. I think today, if I'm not mistaken, he's the director of the Center of International Strategic Studies in North Carolina University. Mr. Deep Poker is a senior research fellow of RAND Corporation. As you know, RAND is one of the most prestigious think tank of America, doing tremendous services to practically all agencies, most specifically the U.S. Air Force and CIA. These two gentlemen came here and they talked to my wife, and they said, what are Ninoy's plans? I said, what are his plans? He's in jail. Well, he said, you know, on the side of the president, our assessment is Mr. Marcos, Mr. Enrile, General Espino, Secretary Melchor, and General Ramos. Now, you must remember that there was a bias in favor of Melchor and Ramos, maybe because they were products of American service schools. But to them, the key was these two gentlemen have established a reputation for integrity and honesty. So that in the hierarchy, you know, these were more or less in this side. You must remember, this is martial law. Wala nang politika ngayon eh. Now, on the opposition side, hindi naman nadidinig sila Jerry at sila Joby, kami lang dalawa ni Pepe. And this is the only situation. Now, again, meron naman prejudice kay Pepe. Alam mo naman si Pepe, pag nakakita ng Amerikano yan, eh, talagang nanliliyab ang katawan niya. And this is the position of Pepe. He is a nationalist. And I would like to believe that if President Marcos can only enlist his help and his services, he would be the greatest Tanud Bayan in this country. And I mean that. So that's the situation.
The First Lady also figured in that assessment.
Well, they felt that if the President goes, the First Lady will also retire. In the same way that when Peron died in Argentina, it was only a few months after Isabelita was swept aside by the military.
Mr. Aquino, I'm really... I have a very little knowledge of the CIA. And the little knowledge I know is that it's a cloak and dagger organization. But I'm surprised that they are so open to you and to your wife in so far as certain information are concerned.
Mind you, they were not representing the CIA when they talked to my wife. They were formerly connected. But when they went to my wife, they were merely researchers for their respective organizations. One is for the Center for Strategic Studies in North Carolina University. He's the director, and the other one's with RAND.
I suppose they were here on a project study for some agency, no?
Well, you must remember that America, because of her global interest, makes a periodic assessment of all countries in the world. She will not be where she is now, and I think she will be wanting in her global obligations if she did not make a thorough assessment, a country-to-country assessment. In fact, even Japan projects the second and third echelon leaders way in advance.
Do I gather from your information, Sir Aquino, that it's the United States that determines who will be president of the Philippines every few years from the gatherings of these reports that come in? Would you not call that political meddling by another country? Always determining who is going to be president?
Most technically, it is meddling. But let's face it, America, Russia, China are dominant superpowers. And in their global strategy, they will meddle. They have meddled in Angola, they are meddling in Rhodesia, they're meddling in Somalia, they're meddling in Ethiopia, they're meddling all over Latin America, and because of their greatness, of their bigness, you see, their global interests are so wide. For example, the Philippines is an ally of America. They have two of their biggest bases in the Pacific Basin here. Could you imagine what will happen to American global policy if the Philippines all of a sudden somersaulted and went to the other camp, let alone being neutral? So they'll have to meddle, if you want to use the word in quotation.
If you were president, Mr. Aquino, would you allow the American government to meddle into our affairs?
Every president, if he is true to his oath, will try his very best to prevent meddling. But, I submit, no president can stop meddling 100%. For example, you need your foreign loans. The Philippines today owe $6.4 billion abroad. To that extent, you've already hacked your soul. To that extent, you're already indebted to these people. To that extent, the viability of your currency depends on external pressure. We go to Japan for commodity loans annually. To that extent, we are already beholden to Japan. We export our bananas to Japan. If Japan says no banana from the Philippines, our entire banana industry, which is almost $100 million, collapses. To that extent, again, they meddle. Now, a president, to avoid meddling, must completely sanitize the country from everybody else. And then you become a hermit kingdom, which cannot be. Under this global dependency, it's impossible.
Pero isn't that a black and white situation, Senator? For example, the example you cited, Japan saying no bananas from the Philippines when they need bananas.
Well, not necessarily from the Philippines. They get bananas from Ecuador. They can get bananas from Costa Rica. But because we have a favorable balance, they will buy the banana from the Philippines, or because the banana producers in the Philippines are in joint venture with the Japanese. So that's the catch there.
Well, he said it's cheaper to get the bananas from the Philippines.
Well, you know, yes and no.
I don't think a foreign policy or politics would dictate to that extent trade preferences or trade arrangements.
Well, in the ideal situation, it should not. But the truth of the matter is, you know, it is. When you have a tremendous trade, that's why Mr. Marcos is correct when he diversifies our export targets. Before, our exports were limited only to Japan and United States. So why did he venture into the socialist countries? To have what he calls a smorgasbord approach to the whole thing. So that if one country pressures you, you can always fall back on another country. And this is a very good approach, the innovative approach in foreign policy that they have done. And I fully submit to that. We should have done that long ago.
I'd like to pursue Teddy's earlier question. Since you are a candidate for a political position, and if you are the leader of the nation, would you tolerate your people becoming or having connections with the foreign intelligence agencies like the CIA?
By people, you mean the intelligence service of the armed forces of the Philippines?
No, outside of that.
Outside of the...
Yes, I'm not saying that the intelligence organizations of the armed forces have links with that. I don't know, I'm just a layman, but...
I agree fully with Secretary Enrique. If a person merely talks to a CIA, there is nothing wrong. If you're an American and you're a CIA, there is nothing wrong. But if you're a Filipino in the payroll of the CIA, that is very bad, and I'll never tolerate that. And we have a law, I think the Sumulong law, that prohibits anybody from becoming an agent of a foreign power.
Precisely, Mr. Senator. It's like this. It's okay if it's the military who get into contact with the CIA, but for civilians, for example, like us, the people, having very close and intimate contacts with the CIA, would you tolerate such a thing if you were head of the nation?
As long as it does not affect the welfare of the country. For example, Teddy Owen is the editor of the Bulletin, and you have certain information you want to check, and you have a friend in the organization who can check for you. An exchange of information. What's so bad about that? Why should I penalize you? Why should I say, Teddy Owen, you cannot talk to those people? But the moment you start telling to the CIA or passing government secrets, then I will bring the law against you. But as long as you're talking to them and as you would talk to anybody else and get exchange and information about personalities on stories that you're developing, I don't think we should put a curtailment on that point.
You know, this one interesting thing that comes out, I think they brought it out earlier, is that you have access to a lot of information, you talk to a lot of people, many of whom are in the CIA or were CIA or working with corporations or agencies close to the CIA. The question then crops up in my mind, how come all these people come to you? You know, what was so special about Benigno Aquino Jr. that an ambassador would say, tell his station manager of the CIA, give him this information, here's the password, here's the code. Somebody else would come to your wife and ask her who in the hierarchy would likely succeed President Marcos, and that kind of thing. This is that sort of intrigue,
yes.
Sir.
Number one, may I be specific, Ronnie?
Please, please.
In the first instance, you say, why should the ambassador talk to Ninoy Aquino and introduce him to CIA chief? Very simple. I was representing the Philippine government, and I came with a letter from the Foreign Secretary of the Philippines asking formally for information. So, not because I'm Ninoy Aquino, but because I was...
because you didn't mention the letter earlier, sir.
No, I said that I was sent by Secretary Mendez on that particular mission. But before we go into any further, may I just, in fairness to my family and myself, I would like to address this to Secretary Enrile. I feel very strongly about this because Mr. Enrile has maligned me, defamed me, and according to my lawyers, I can sue him in court. But I recognize the favors that I've enjoyed and which the Secretary has extended to my family here. And I would like to give him time to check his records. Any other person who said what he said, maybe I would not mind so much. But when he said it, I was so stunned that he can say such a thing because he should know better. And I'm referring to this. Secretary Enrile said, regarding Cecilio Sumat, and I quote, Sumat was a leader of an association that wanted to buy home lots in Hacienda Luisita. Luisita was formerly owned by Tabacalera and was acquired in 1962 by the family of Aquino's wife. Aquino at that time was governor, a nationalista, and the president was liberal, Macapagal. The in-laws of Aquino needed the equivalent of 13 million at that time, and they went to the central bank in 1962. I think Cuaderno was the governor at that time, I'm not sure. And Cuaderno said he will authorize the dollar purchase on one condition, that they will sell home lots to the residents of Luisita. In the meantime, Aquino, who was then a nationalista, turned liberal in order to enlist the support of President Macapagal in this transaction. Now, this is a vicious lie, a canard, and the worst black propaganda. And I cannot imagine how Secretary Enrile can say this thing. Why not?
What?
Because he was our lawyer. His family firm, the Ponce Enrile, Sigion Reyna, Bello, and Montesillo law officers were the ones who prepared these documents. And when did we buy Luisita? In 1958. I was no longer mayor. I was ousted as mayor of Concepcion in 1958 by the Supreme Court. I was not even governor. 58, we bought it. In 1958, the president was Garcia. It was the first year of Garcia. Now, how can he distort the truth and the fact when he was the lawyer? He knows it. He is a member of the law firm that prepared the documents. Now, how can Secretary Enrile say that in 1962 we acquired it, and because we needed dollars, I switched parties from nationalista to liberal? Now, this is really very painful.
When was the transaction consummated?
58.
When did you switch parties, sir?
63.
63.
And my point is, any other individual I can forgive, but not Secretary Enrile because he's the lawyer. He should know. He studied the tax angle of transaction as member of the law firm. In 1958, I was not even mayor because I was ousted by the Supreme Court for the AIDS case. We bought it in 58. Therefore, when I switched party in 1963, we already owned Visita for 5 years. 5 taon na kami doon. Eh, bakit naman yung sasabihin ngayon? And he tried to picture me at the time of election, mind you. Nag-i-election ngayon. Hindi ako masyadong kilala ng Metro Manila. Abayang Ninoy na yan, masamang tao yan. Para makakuha lang ng dollar allocation ng mga biyena niya, naglipat ng partido yan. That's implication of his statement. And that is a black propaganda because we bought the property in 58, and I hope Mr. Enrile right now, if he's listening, will call up his partners or his former partners, his own brother-in-law, Sigion Reyna, Segi, Montesillo, Bello, and check back the records. We bought it in 58.
When
The
did they
transaction
pay,
was finished in 58.
In other words,
Everything was finished in 58. We were owners of Luisita for 5 years when I moved over. Now, how can he say this? And I'm really shocked, and I would like that the secretary, the gentleman that he is, will immediately send me an apology on this. Because if he does not give me a public apology, I hope he will not force me to seek satisfaction from the courts. And I do not want to go into that. But I was really very stunned when he said this. Ngayon, ito naman sumat. You know, he dwelt lengthy on that murder, sumat. And they tried to picture me as a murderer. But the secretary naman did not explain the other side of the coin. What did he say? Sumat daw was ordered killed by me. Now, what is the story? There is only one witness against me. And Mr. Marcos knows that it is because of this murder charge, this frame-up, this trump-up charge that they placed against me, that I refused to deal with the military commission. Because it is a blatant frame-up. I told Mr. Marcos that. Mr. Marcos, kung gano'n, lahat paglalabanan natin, pero yung ginawa mo sa aking kabalastugan na yan, hindi ko matatanggap. Why? Melody surrendered in 1961. He issued a statement. 4 years after the incident in 1967, he said, sometime in 1967, mind you, sometime in 1967, to be more exact, let me quote the exact testimony of Melody on this particular point. Melody said to the investigators in 1961, September 27, 1971, September 27, 1971, statement issued before Judge Fernando Bartolome of San Fernando, Pampanga, in the presence of Colonel Eduardo Vicente of the 1st CIS. Question. Saan mo nakita si Senator Aquino? Sagot. Noong kalagitnaan ng 67, kalagitnaan, could have been June, July, August. Noong kalagitnaan ng 67, kinausap na naman namin si Senador Aquino sa bahay ni Ernesto Chupaco sa Barrio Alto, Hacienda Luisita, Tarlac. Ang kasama namin noon ay si Commander Dante, Commander Sumulong, Commander Cruz, ako, Peter Ilocano at si Priok. Kasama noon ni Aquino ay si Ernesto Chupaco at si Tomas Henson. Napag-usapan namin ang tungkol sa kanyang pagkakandidato sa senador. Isinumbong din noon ni Aquino kay Commander Dante ang tungkol kay Cecilio Sumat, na noon ay kapitan del barrio ng Barrio Motrico, La Paz, Tarlac. Ayon sa sumbong ni Aquino kay Sumulong at Dante, na si Sumat daw ay PC informer at nangunguna ng mga nanununog ng tubo sa asyenda. Sinabi niya, kami na ang bahala. That is the exact quotation, nothing more, nothing less, in 1972. In 1973, 2 years later, Mr. Melody was brought again before investigators. This time I was already detained. The first statement was issued before martial law, 1971. On the basis of the statement, no charges were filed against me. In 73, after martial law was declared, hinuli si Melody, tinawag na naman si Melody. Sinabi ngayon ni Melody, at what other instance, if any, do you recall having met Senator Aquino? Question to kay Melody, by Fiscal Juan Sison, in the presence of Alfredo Olgado, July 31, 1973, 2 years later. Sagot, in late November 1967, I, Commander Sumulong, Dante, Ilocano, Puriok, Tomas Henson, Ernesto Chupaco met at the house of Chupaco in Lucita with Aquino. This time Aquino told us, particularly to Dante and Sumulong, that one Cecilio Sumat was a PC informer, a leader who was burned cane fields in Lucita and was molesting the barrio people at Hacienda. He told us to liquidate and get rid of Sumat. Aba-iba na ito. Noong umpisa, in 71 sinabi niya, kami na ang bahala. In 73, he told us to liquidate and get rid of Sumat. Alright. Dalawa ng contradiction, ha? First contradiction, kalagitnaan ng 67, which is May, June, July. Binago niya, late November. First statement, sinabi na kanyang bahala. Second statement, liquidate and kill him. In 1975, 2 years later, his testimony was perpetuated. What did he say in his testimony? Question, when did you see Aquino? Yes, sir. More or less in November 1967. Eh di tatlong third version na ito. First version, kalagitnaan ng 67. Second version, late November. Third version, more or less in November. I, together with Sumulong, Under Cruz, Peter Ilocano, went to Barrio Alto. Where did you go there? Our group went to have a meeting with Benigno, Aquino, Tomas Henson, and Ernesto Chupaco. Were you able to have a meeting with Aquino? Yes, sir. What happened in that meeting? We talked about the possibility of ensuring the candidacy of then Governor Aquino for senator. Sa makatuwid, if it is sometime in November to ensure my candidacy, it must have been before the election. Because there's nothing to ensure after the election. The election was held November 14, so it must have been early November. So here you have the third version. And here he said, Aquino told Dante to get rid of Cecilio Sumat. Now, this is the statement. 3. Who is Melody? According to his own testimony in open court, he killed no less than 50 people. 5 ang Pinay. Sinabi niya sa korte kung paano niya binaril yung mga PC. Sinabi niya sa korte kung paano niya inambush ang mga tao sa highway. Sinabi niya kung paano niya pinagpapapatay mga sibilyan. 50. Ngayon, with 50 charges against him, pag nagtestigo sa akin, libre na siya. Eh bakit hindi naman magsisinungaling yan? So I told the people, how can you believe such a polluted testimony? Nag-iiba-ibang istorya niya. Alright. Pero hindi yan ang masama eh.
But Senator,
yes.
Did that meeting ever take place?
Never. Precisely, I'm going to this point. Walang meeting eh. Paano ako makikipag-meeting sa kanya? Kumakampanya akong 67. I was running all over Philippines for senator in 67 and I was being sued by Mr. Marcos for my age case. Pupunta pa ba naman ako dyan makikipag-usap sa mga yan? And now, this is the beautiful testimony. This is an affidavit of Commander Dante Bernabe Boscaino, given to the Supreme Court last January. Una, ukol sa mga paratang sa akin, Dante, before the Supreme Court, sa murder case, wala po akong anumang kinalaman sa pagkamatay ng sinabi nilang Cecilio Sumat. Hindi po totoo o wala akong nalalaman sa nisasabing nag-usap kami ni na Senator Aquino at sinabi niyang kami ang bahala kay Sumat. Maghaharap po ako, tayo ng mga testigo at makapaglalahad ako ng sirkumstansyang magpapatunay sa katotohanan ng sinasabi kong ito. This is Dante's own testimony. Alright. Melody said, Dante was present, Sumulong was present, Aquino was present, Chupaco is present, Henson is present. All of us 5 have affidavits to say there was never any meeting. The government refused to believe all of this. They took one, polluted testimony. Henson and Chupaco have never been charged in their lives. Now, look at this point. Si Melody 5 ang kaso niya. Pumatay ng tao. Sinabi ng gobyerno, idiin mo si Aquino, libre ka na. Didiniin niya ako. Dante, libre na Dante, idiin mo si Aquino. Hindi po pwede. Hindi po totoo yan. Now, who will you believe of the two testimonies? Here is Dante who is being offered freedom to testify against me. He refused because it's a lie. As against a testimony of one witness who took advantage of freedom to perjure me. Ito pa sabi ni Dante. Pangalawa, sa subversion case, base sa spesifikasyon 1 and 2, hindi po totoo o wala po akong nalalaman na sinasabi nilang nagbigay sa akin si Senador Aquino ng halagang 15,000 pesos. At hindi rin po totoo o wala akong nalalaman sa sinasabi nilang nagbigay ng baril na kalibre 45 si Senador Aquino sa akin. Now, this is the testimony of Dante. Now, what's the truth of this? I never gave Dante 15,000 pesos, but I told them. May demonstration sa Tarlac in 1969. There were 30,000 farmers. Eleksyon, 69, mind you. Presidential election, Yusmeña Marcos. Congressional election, ni Congressman Yap. 30,000 mga magsasaka ito, butante namin to. There are only 60,000 votes in my district. Ihingi sa akin ng tulong para demonstrasyon. Hindi ko matutulungan yan. But I did not give 15,000. I think I gave 1,500. Nag-demonstrate sila sa Congress para sa land reform against specie abuses. Masama ba yun? Politiko ako. Humingi sa akin ng tulong itong mga farmers na magde-demonstrate. Nagbigay ako. Bakit naman sasabihin nila ngayon na yun ay napakasama? Lahat naman kaming politiko sa Tarlac nagbibigay. Alright. But let me point out to you the testimony of Dante in his meeting with Mr. Marcos. You know, I was surprised when Dante made this statement because the first hint I got this was Mr. Marcos himself. In Pochola, I went to Malacanang and Mr. Marcos told me, akala ko ikang ganun Ninoy, bata mo yung mga NPA na yan, hindi man pala. Sinabi ni Dante sa akin, hindi ka man kakakilala. So immediately I jumped up. Ako, Mr. President, sinabi na pala ni Dante siya, ba't mo naman ako binibilanggo pa ako? Yun naman pala sinabi na. Then he changed the subject. Maybe he realized that he should not have said that, no? But this is beautiful. Because Dante confirmed what Mr. Marcos told me. Sabi niya, ang sabi naman niya, Marcos, ang sabi naman ni Presidente Marcos, bakit daw naman pumapatay kami ng walang kasalanan at tahimik na mamamayan? Tulad daw po ni Sumat na Kapitan del Barrio ng Motrico na pinapatay sa amin ni Aquino. Sabi ni Marcos, ang sinabi ko po'y hindi po totoo iyan. Ang sabi pa niya'y bibigay daw sa amin ng armas si Aquino. Ang sagot ko po naman, iyang si Aquino po ay walang pakialam sa amin. Katulad lamang siya ng mga politiko na pasakay-sakay sa mga halal. These are the direct quotes of Dante in his testimony to Marcos and his testimony in the Supreme Court. Hindi po totoo yan. Si Aquino katulad lamang ng mga politiko sa amin na pasakay-sakay sa mga halal. Alright. Now, another point. Sinabi pa ni Dante in his meeting this time with General Gatan. General Gatan told him, huwag ka nang sumama dyan sa kaso ni Aquino. Hindi naman ikaw ang kalaban namin Si Aquino lang naman ang kalaban. He said, and I quote, ang sabi po niya, General Gatan, hindi naman daw kami talagang kalaban dito ni Presidente. Ito raw po ay laban nilang dalawa ni Aquino at naging international na. At napasubo na rin daw, kanya tuloy-tuloy na raw yan. At ako raw ay bibigyang amnesty at huwag aalalahanin ang aking kaso. Pinakukumusta daw ako ni Danding at siya raw ay nagpapasalamat sa akin at natulungan ko rin daw siya nung siya ay humabol sa pagkagobernador ng Tarlac. Here's the classic. Danding is Danding Cojuangco. And Danding said, thank you very much to Dante for helping me for governor. Lahat may ibig sabihin, kabilat ng politiko sa Tarlac, nung kapanahon ng yon, 69, at 67, 69, 71, talagang, kasama na, butante namin yan sa Tarlac Nakasalamuha sa amin yung mga yan
With all these protestations, Mr. Aquino, why do you refuse to present evidence in the
beautiful.
court?
You know, Mr. Marcos is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. All of these generals are military officers. Mr. Marcos said, I am guilty by overwhelming evidence. He ordered me to jail for 5 years. If these officers will say I am innocent, it's just like saying Mr. Marcos is a liar. And they will never do that. All I ask Mr. Marcos is, send me before an impartial tribunal, not a military officer.
But you're prejudging all this military.
Napaso na ako eh. If you attend that doggone mission, we stand up, hindi ka pa nakakatayo eh, denied ng motion mo eh. Eh, siyempre mga general yan eh. Eh, pag nagalit si Apo sa kanila, eh, di-retirado na sila.
But, sir, wouldn't you think that by making a statement such as that, you're really questioning the integrity of all these men?
No, it is the circumstance, Ronnie. Kamukha mo, empleyado ka ng NNPC, maatakin ba si Marcos? Ba, hindi pwede.
No.
Eh, na nga eh.
I will not attack the president. I have no quarrel with him.
Ba, nga eh. Because you are also in the NNPC. Your employee. Ito yung mga talagang army officer ni Marcos, kung siya yung commander-in-chief. Ang gusto ko sana, bigay ako sa isang civilian judge. Yun na naman sinabi ko, Presidente, when I saw him in Malacanang in June 21, kako, Mr. President, kanya po ako'y nagpipilit na magpunta rito sa inyo para sabihin ko sa inyo, pag pinilit nyo akong pumasok sa hukumang militar, ay pabibitay na ako. Hindi po ako tatayo dyan, ako magdidepensa.
But do you intend to take this evidence to the Supreme Court?
This evidence are already in the Supreme Court. All of these are in the Supreme Court. And I went to the Supreme Court on a habeas corpus. I am now waiting for the Supreme Court to tell me whether I should go back to the military commission or to a civilian court. All I want is fairness. Because, Pucholo, if I am being tried by a civilian fiscal, itong murder nito, wala na ito eh. Sa preliminary investigation pa lang, patay na yan eh.
Excuse me, Senator.
Yes.
Have you not taken advantage of this presidential decree allowing or authorizing the Supreme Court to examine question of fact rather than law?
You must remember that due process begins from the first step. Pag ako'y natiklo sa lower court, mahirap na paglalaban mo sa taas. It must be from the very beginning, from the court of first instance. From the preliminary investigation, paglalabanan mo na yan. And that's why I've been insisting that I should be given a preliminary investigation under Republic Act 1700. That is a specific provision, and they never gave it to me.
Before a fiscal?
Before a judge, because it's a capital offense.
But there have been many Supreme Court rulings, precedents,
yes,
where the decisions of the lower court were reversed.
Definitely. Yes, but why should I go to a handicapped position if I can start from the scratch? Sabi ni Secretary Enrile, kung ayaw niyang desisyon ng Korte Militar, di mag-apila siya. Abay, mahirap na yun. Bakit naman ako susubo sa isang bagay na tagilid na ako? I want to protect my rights from the very beginning.
And that is before the judge?
Before a competent civilian judge. No, why do I say civilian judge?
Because who appoints the judges?
Sabi pala ni Presidente Marcos sa akin, kasalanan mo ikayan eh. Nung araw pa, binibigyan kita ng civilian judge. Kako, Mr. President, nung araw po, lahat ng mga judges na yan, hawak mo sa leeg. Dahil may resignation yan eh. Pag hindi mo nagustuhan ng pagmumukha niyan, binunot mo resignation, patay na. But now, under this new setup, if they're appointed, now, they have a tenure up to 65 years old, I think. And they cannot be removed except for cause.
Didn't you at one time or another, Mr. Aquino, doubted the impartiality of the Supreme Court?
I said that. I said that. But no, I did not even that. I said it. I withdrew all my cases from the Supreme Court.
But now you're willing to submit to the Supreme Court.
Well, you know, after Justice Castro spoke in the World Law Congress, and so much water passed under the bridge. Remind you, this happened in 73-74. And since then, there has been a tremendous change. I will not say that the change has been monumental, but there have been steps. And in the speech of Justice Castro, which my mother brought to me, he very definitely declared that they are now really sticking to human rights. And I told that to the Supreme Court. I said, Your Honors, I said before that I did not recognize this. But now I said I'm submitting myself and I'm leaving my fate into your hands.
Mr. Aquino, since we talked about so many names you mentioned regarding the testimony of Dante and Melody and so on, did you know any of these people? Did you know, for instance, Commander Dante
I never met Dante
Maria
in my life.
Sison? Have you met Sison before, sir?
Once. Before he took to the hills, I think sometime in 68, I recall the headquarters of the KM was bugged by the military and there was a newspaper account.
This is Susema
That's the only
Sison.
time I saw him.
This is Susema Sison.
Yes. In fact, I will not remember his face if I saw him now.
What about who are the people you met with before martial law? And
well, I don't think that is Sison, now that I recall it.
It was not Sison?
I don't think so, because his pictures now do not tally. Of course, even the Dante now, every time I look at him in the Supreme Court, he's not the Dante that I remembered before when I met Sumulong. You know, I met Sumulong sometime in 1967 when I was still governor. And they claim that Dante was there, but if you make me swear on the Bible that that is Dante, I will not be able to swear.
So you didn't meet Dante before except in that Sumulong?
That Sumulong instance, yes.
Sir Senator, do you subscribe to subversion, the way it's being pronounced by the NPAs? Do you subscribe to subscribe to subversion and overthrow of government by the NPA?
No, I do not. Firstly, Teddy, I would like to say very categorically, one, I am not a communist. I have never been a communist. I have never even been a member of a communist front organization. Never. And the court convicted me to die by firing squad without even establishing that fact of membership, let alone a ranking leader. Now, how was I convicted? A certain witness by the name of Simeon del Rosario said, after reading my articles, after reading my speeches, he concluded, expert opinion daw niya, komunista si Aquino. That's how I got convicted. I don't know any of these leaders that they're showing here that are now on trial. Never met most of them. If you show them to me now,
Victor
I won't
Corpus,
know them.
sir. Nothing, never knew Victor Corpus?
I never saw him. I never saw this guy Nilo Tayag in my life. I don't know any of these personalities.
Is it true that Victor Corpus or these people who were involved in the PMA armory raid tried to borrow your car?
That is what Pusa said. That Victor Corpus was there. I don't remember him at all. But my point is, if I were the president now, I would have taken advantage of the offer of the Communist Party of the Philippines to join the Batasan. You know, Teddy, very sincerely, I think the president should consider legalizing the Communist Party of the Philippines so that they will be above ground. Give them an opportunity to discuss this openly, provided they disavow their aim to overthrow the government by force and violence. That's the only situation where I will not agree with them. But provided they are willing to abide by the rules of our political ballgame, the president should allow them to come in this parliamentary form. We have a communist party in France, a communist party in Italy, a communist party even in Japan. Why should we not allow these people? They go underground only because we're persecuting them. We do not allow them to come above ground. So I think this was a tremendous opportunity. But I was given the sign it's only 3 minutes.
No, you got 4 minutes.
4 minutes. I would like to do a little commercial.
Before the commercial.
Yes.
You categorically state you had nothing to do with the communists, you are not a member of the Communist Party, you're not a subversive.
Definitely. I stand by that.
What about the CIA, sir? Let's put this...
I am not a CIA agent, and I vehemently deny anyone who will claim that I am an agent.
But you worked with and not for them. You said that earlier. You worked with and not for them.
I worked with them when I was an agent and an officer of the government of the Philippines on instructions of the presidents of the Philippines, for which I was commended.
Were you ever a source for the CIA?
Beg pardon?
A source?
Never. Never. On that instance.
Since you didn't get the opportunity to make a defense in court, are you prepared to swear by everything you said?
Yes. And I've told this to the officers here. There's no secret here. I've already told them. That's why I'm surprised. After all of my service to the Philippine government, the medals that were given to me, I am now being accused of communist. But I would like to direct this appeal to President Marcos if he's listening. I would like to ask him the opportunity to grant me my request to meet with the men of media. As you will note, I have abided by our agreement that we should not be straying too far away from what Secretary Enrique discussed. And I have abided with this. I have not talked about my candidacy in this coming election, which is so important to me now. And I hope the President will allow the men of the media to meet with me, foreign as well as local correspondents, so we can discuss our politics. Alam po niyo napakahirap itong aking kalagayan sapagkat ako'y piniit sa bilangguan na 5 taon at kalahati at wala akong nakakausap. Ako'y nakandidato at ako'y sabik na sabik sanang makipagkamay at makipag-usap sa ating mga kababayan. Nung ako po'y nagdesisyon na kakandidato, sinabi sa akin ng ina, bakit naman ikaw mangangangas ka pa riyan? Nakabilanggo ka na. Wala ka naman pwedeng taong kausapin. Tatakbo-takbo ka pa, anak. Wala ka na ikang natitira pang mailang-ilang pag-aari dyan. Pinagbili mo na lahat sa 5 taong ka nakabilanggo. Ang sagot ko po sa aking ina, ako'y tatakbo dito sa halalang ito. Parang malaman ko naman kung meron pang mailan-ilang tayong kababayan na naniniwala sa akin. Sapagkat kung wala na pong naniniwala sa akin, bakit naman ako'y magpapakahirap pang magpapabilanggo rito? Pangalawa ron, ang sabi ko po sa aking ina, siguro naman kako ang mga halal ng Metro Manila at ng sambayan ng Pilipinas. Pag dumating na yung takdang oras na ibabagsak nilang kanilang kahatulan at isusulat na yung mga pangalan sa balota, matitimbang naman nila kung sino sa mga inihahalal nila ang naghirap ng 5 taon at kalahati para sa kapakanan ng bayan at sino naman yung mga nagpasarap, nagpasasa, nagpayaman sa 5 taon. At diyan lamang nila pagbabatayan. Kung pipiliin nila yung mga nagpasasa, nagpayaman at naging malalaking dambuhala sa 5 taong nakaraan at kaming mga naghirap ay patatalo, ay tatanggapin ko po at mamatamisin kong masarap sa aking kalooban. Pero ang aking dasal lamang ay bigyan sana ako ng pagkakataon ng Ginoong Marcos na sagutin itong mga nangyayari. Achievement daw ang kanyang performance. Ako po ay nakahanda na sasagutin ko yung achievement na yan. Sapagkat ako ay naniniwala pagdating sa achievement na yan ay marami kami masasabi. I would like to thank you, Ronnie, and the NNPC and President Marcos for this tremendous opportunity given me, and I hope that I have clarified some of the questions.
Mr. Aquino, this was done in the sense of fairness and justice. We'd like to thank you for being a guest on the program. We'd like to thank the panelists, Mr. Enrique Romualdez of the Daily Express, Mr. Reynaldo Naval of the Times Journal, and Mr. Teddy Owen of Bulletin Today. For NAPC GTV4 and the Voice of the Philippines, this is Ronnie Nathanielsz saying thank you and good night.